Saxon Algebra Lesson 58. In this lesson, we're going to be multiplying polynomials. If you remember in the past, when multiplying with variables and with parentheses, we do distributive property with the number on the outside of the parentheses to what's on the inside of the parentheses. Let's take a look at this example. 3x parentheses x squared plus y. So 3x is on the outside of the parentheses. So we take that 3x and we multiply it to the x squared and we multiply it to the y. Because that plus sign separates the x squared and y, it makes it a binomial. Two separate things we multiply with. Let's multiply that first step first. Multiply the numbers first. 3 times an invisible 1 is 3. X times x squared. Remember, we're multiplying with variables. If your variables match, you add your exponents. So you have x and x squared. The x has one exponent, the x squared has 2. So you add that. 1 plus 2 is 3. So it'll be x to the third. Now, let's multiply 3x times y. Multiply your numbers first. 3 times an invisible 1 is 3. Then you have x times y. Because the variables do not match, you just bring both variables down, x and y. So your final answer would be 3x to the third plus 3xy. Let's look at example 1b. Negative 4xy times x squared plus y minus 2z squared. Because my parentheses has 3 different terms, that means we multiply what's on the outside of the parentheses 3 different times. So you're going to be multiplying that negative 4xy to all 3. Let's multiply the negative 4xy times x squared first. Multiply the numbers. Negative 4 times invisible 1, which will be negative 4. Our x's, we have x and x squared. Remember, we add those exponents. That will get us x to the third. Because we have invisible 1 here, 1 plus 2 is 3. And the y, because there is no y in the second parentheses, we bring our y down. Now at this point, you should see how we're multiplying and not have to write it out like we were writing it out in this step. We're multiplying negative 4xy times y. Let's multiply the numbers first, which will be negative 4 times a positive 1. And remember that 1's invisible. So negative 4 times 1 is negative 4. X times, there's no x showing, so the x comes straight down. Then you have y times y, and we add those two together to create y to the second power. Now, the very last multiplication step, which will be negative 4xy times 2z squared. Multiply the numbers first. Negative 4 times negative 2, which will make a positive 8. The x times, there's no x with a negative 2z squared, so we just bring our x down. Same thing for y. There's no y with the negative 2z squared. So the y comes down. And because the z squared doesn't match anything, it comes straight down. And that would be your final answer. Let's take a look at example 2. X plus 7 times x plus 3. We're actually multiplying two different binomials. What's so cool about multiplying two different binomials is we can break it down into two different multiplication equations and just use distributive property to get our final answer. Let me show you what I mean. We have x times x plus 3. And do the same thing for 7. 7 times x plus 3. Now remember, that's a positive 7. It's almost like we're creating a new equation, but it makes it a little bit easier when getting our final answer. Now we do what we've learned in the past, which is distributive property. We take what's on the outside and multiply what's on the inside of the parentheses. So we'll do x times x first. You remember our variables? We add together. X and x make x squared. Now let's multiply x times 3. X times 3 is positive 3x. Let's move over to second parentheses. Multiply x times 7, or 7 times x, which will be positive 7x. Then 7 times 3, which would be positive 21. And the very last step to get our final answer is to combine like terms. When we combine like terms, we look at our variables and see, like I said before, things that match. We have x squared, 3x, 7x, and 21. If you notice, the variable x and x match because they both have one exponent. So we combine those. 3 plus 7 equals 10x. The 21 has no other numbers to add to, and the x squared has no other numbers that can be added to it. So this is my final answer. In example 2, we use distributive property to find the product of two binomials. I'm going to introduce something called the FOIL method. The FOIL method is an easy way to multiply without having to do so many steps. FOIL is an acrostic for first, outer, inner, last. The first is the first numbers of each parentheses. So it would be multiplying x times x, because x and x are the first numbers of the parentheses. The outer means the numbers that are on the outside, which will be x times 3. The inner would be the numbers on the inside, which will be 2 times x. And the last will be the numbers that are the last numbers in each binomial, which will be 2 times 3. Let's take a look at example 3 and use the FOIL method to solve it. 2a plus 5 times 3a plus 1. The first step of the FOIL method is actually the first numbers. So we are going to multiply 2a times 3a. 2a times 3a equals 6a squared. Now we're going to multiply the outer numbers, which will be 2a times 1. 2a times 1 equals a positive 2a. Now let's multiply the inner numbers, which will be 5 times 3a. 5 times 3 is 15a. And the very last step is multiply your last numbers, which will be 5 times 1. 5 times 1 is positive 5. And of course, before we get the final answer, we always have to look to combine like terms to see if any numbers actually match. Take a look at your variables. You will notice that you have 2a and 15a. The a's only have one exponent, which makes them match. So we add them together. 2 plus 15 is 17a. There are no other numbers that can be added to 5, and nothing can be added to 6a squared. And that is our final answer. In this last example, you see that we're multiplying a binomial, which is 3x plus 4, times a trinomial, which is x squared minus 4x minus 6. The FOIL method will not work with this example because of the trinomial that's given. So what we're going to do like we did in example 1 and do distributive property. We're going to take the 3x and we're going to multiply it into this trinomial. Then we're going to take the 4 and multiply it into the same trinomial and start the distributive property. 3x times x squared will be 3x cubed. 3x times negative 4x will be negative 12x squared. Now we'll multiply 3x times negative 6, which is negative 18x. Now let's move on to the next parentheses and multiply 4 times x squared, which will be a positive 4x squared. 4 times negative 4x, which will be negative 16x. Then we'll multiply 4 times negative 6, which is negative 24. I'm going to keep repeating myself over and over again and remind you that when we get our final answer, we always have to make sure to combine like terms. We take a look at our variables and see the variables with the exponents that match, which is x squared and x squared and x and x. So we're going to add those variables. 12x squared plus 4x squared, which is a negative 8x squared. Then we have negative 18x and negative 16x, which equals a negative 30 down. Same thing with the negative 24. And this is my final answer. If you have any questions, make sure you come and see me. I don't mind helping.